Hi there, I'm Luke Hector and this is the Broken Meeple, the show where I rave and rant about board games, but usually more the ranting part, let's be honest. So today we've got a game that is definitely, I will say, outside of my comfort zone. This is Asian Tigers, A Story of Prosperity, supposedly an economic game about the growth of the Asian markets. Yeah, not exactly the first thing I would sort of gun towards, do you think? But I wanted to give it a try. It's a new publisher, Pythagoras. I've not really seen a lot of their stuff. The designer has done games like Nippon and Madeira and Panamax, which granted are not games that I gelled with either. But I do like to jump into these games now and again to say, like, you know, some hidden gems do come out of the woodwork when you go out of your comfort zone. There are some that are even on my shelf. You know, Pulsar 2849 is a classic example I tend to use. But this one definitely was a bit of a weird one at first, because when I looked it up before Essen, I didn't see the cover. All I saw was the name, and it was just said Asian Tigers. And I thought, oh, this would be cool, you know, we can have an Asian zoo-themed game. That'd be nice, you know, something a little bit different from the general norm of giraffes and zebras and all that. And then I looked at the cover and realised, right, it's, crap. It's an economic game. It's like, imagine the disappointment where I thought I was going to get a zoo game about Asian tigers and then realised, oh, that's what Asian tigers means, okay. Google is your friend. But by all means, I wanted to jump in and see what it's like. It's not had a lot of people talking about it, apart from a couple of, you know, the usual folk who get out early and say everything's great. But I wanted to find out for myself whether this could be a hidden gem.
Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
Asian Tigers takes place over 2 rounds, of which you have 10 turns each. Your turns are essentially dictated by these meeples, well, these tiny little figures, white, grey and black. You will take 10 of them out of a bag, at random, out of essentially having 4 of each colour, and place them on your board so that you know, for the 10 turns of the round, which worker you're going to have available. This is important because every time you go to a spot on the board, the colour of the worker dictates what workers can go to that spot for the rest of the round, and in each quadrant you have to have all 3 types of workers, so there is a little restriction there. Players essentially have a board full of different infrastructures represented by these little cylinder tokens, as well as some factories represented by little miniatures. Then what happens is that on your turn you will take the next worker off your board and place it into an action space in one of the quadrants. They're all pretty much the same, nigh on 95% identical to each other. But the idea is that these free spaces allow you to spend investment funds, which are on a track, and these investment funds are used to build the infrastructures in here. So you take one of your things off, and when you clear them all off a particular space, you can get cool bonuses as the game goes on. But the main thing is that you can build universities, factories, power plants, or laboratories, depending on what it is you need. Do I need energy in order to build factories? Build a power plant. Do I want to get a factory and get some of these resource tiles? Well, then I'm going to need the specific factory. Do I want to get more science tokens? Do I want to, you know, whatever it is you need, you're going to build that type of infrastructure. The other thing to bear in mind, though, is that the whole premise of this game is essentially getting influence in the 4 quadrants. So as you build these infrastructures, you'll be able to get influence and level along the track, but when each era or each round ends, whoever has built the most investment in each quadrant is going to get more influence than other players. And then by the end of the game, you're scoring prosperity points, which are randomly dictated before the game starts by way of random setup tiles, and scoring a lot of victory points based on, oh, I've influenced this particular market, or this particular market. As well as building this different type of infrastructure, you also have these flag tokens that will be set up in the middle of the board, and you can also place a worker on these segments, following the same placement restrictions as before, to trade in the resource tokens acquired by your factories and collect flag tokens. These flag tokens are placed to the side of your board, and essentially these represent endgame scoring modifiers for things like building a lot in one particular quadrant, building lots of different types of infrastructure, having a lot of factories, power plants, that kind of thing. But these stars represent the multiplier that will apply to them at the end of the game, but they also level you up on this central track here, which enables you to again score points at the end of the game, but also dictates the turn order for a round. Both rounds proceed kind of in that similar manner. You have 10 turns each. You know what worker somebody is going to use next. You know the restrictions where you can place them, and you know what workers you've got coming up, so you can kind of plan ahead as to, right, I need to do this white one first, this black one next, and so forth. But once the 2 rounds are end, you drop all the victory points, which predominantly comes from your position on the influence track, your position on the global supply track, and also any endgame scoring bonuses you have off your board. And of course, the one with the most.
I'll
Of course!
Now, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but I am going to question the eyesight capability of anybody who looks at this game and claims that this is a beautiful game in any way, shape, form, colour, reality, planet, I don't know. I thought Ray Safa, or whatever it was, by Delicious Games this year was going to be one of the worst looking games that I've seen. This takes the biscuit. This one is a bland, ugly looking board. As you can see, it's all muted colors. It's all just segments and squares and little circles and numbers and tracks everywhere. There's no bright color anywhere. Nothing's bright. Your yellow player pieces are the brightest thing that you will see in this game. Now, it's trying to be like more efficient in terms of graphic design, and to its credit, some of the graphic design looks a bit messy at first. You think, well, what on earth does this mean? What does this mean? Da, da, da. But as you read the rules and absorb it, the graphic design starts to make sense, and you can tell that there is a certain logic to how these things work. With the one exception that I don't like how the different segments have got writing that is so unbelievably small that even me with near 20/20 vision without my glasses, I wear them mostly for fashion and looking at computer screens, but me with my near 20/20 vision at this distance can barely read the writing. Anybody with worse eyesight or sitting further away cannot read the writing that says what these segments are. There really needed to be a bigger writing or some better way of separating them out, segregating them. But yeah, I mean, the tokens themselves are not, they're not great quality. They're just typical cardboard. These meeples are so thin that they wouldn't stand up to a light breeze, let alone an earthquake test. The components that I've had, I mean, I've got a spare factory in addition to the factories I need. So I've got 7 rather than 6. But then these little cylinders, not only are these a pain because as soon as they fall over they of course roll, why did they need to be cylinders, but also I've got ones that are cut weird. I've got a pink one or something that doesn't have the top on it at all. I've got plenty of these yellow ones here where there is such a bad cut on the bottom of the wood. There's like tiny little bits sticking out, which means the thing will not stand up. This won't stand up straight, and a lot of this game just feels cheap. It's got the look of spreadsheet the game, and in 2025 almost, we really should be done with the whole spreadsheet thing. It's already a theme that's not that interesting, the growth of Asian markets. The theme means nothing in this game. I kid you not, right? The only reason you even remember, if you didn't have the box near you, the only way you can remember that this game is about Asia is the fact that the 4 quadrants are named after Asian cities, so Taiwan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Singapore. If you did not have those 4 names, this game does nothing to remind you are talking about the Asian growth markets. This is as bare bones a theme as you can get. It might as well be a pure abstract game. Okay, theme and components not off to a good start. What about its length? Is it a quick game at least? No, not really. The box says 2 hours, and that's actually pretty accurate, even for a solo game at times. The problem is that you've got 10 turns each, so especially if you've got 4 of you, it's 40 turns per round, which is quite a lot, but there's a decent amount of AP that can be generated from this game, and even though you have some restricted choices about where you can put your guys, the game does drag on and on and on, and all you are doing is rinse and repeating the same thing all the time. You're just basically deciding, right, okay, I'm going to put a worker in this space, I'll build 1 of 4 infrastructures, maybe I'll sell a resource, that's an optional thing, but that's most of what your turns are. Worker goes down, build an infrastructure. Worker goes down, build an infrastructure. Worker goes down, build an infrastructure. One, maybe twice in a round, you might decide, right, I'm going to go to the middle and sell some resources and get some flags. But most of the time it is literally person there, build an infrastructure. Person there, build an infrastructure. Person there, build an infrastructure. The only time it actually sort of generates a interesting sort of bit of fun is when you trigger the bonuses on your board. So when you take these infrastructures off, you can do them in any order you like. As soon as you take the last one, you get bonuses. It could be a bonus tile that just gives you some other ability or bonus influence. It could be getting a HQ down, which literally just breaks tiebreakers. It could just be getting bonus influence and triggering a quadrant bonus, which again is just literally a random tile sit at the beginning of the game. Or you can put the satellites out, which are basically more investment points for the purposes of seeing who's got the most influence in the area. But even those bonuses don't change every game. They're not particularly interesting. I mean, yeah, you go, yeah, I get a little reward, but it doesn't feel that fulfilling. It's just like, yeah, I'll just level up this track a little bit more. Okay, great, whatever. Really, the only part that sort of feels like, oh yeah, okay, this is a little bit different, is when you put the flags on here, because some of these bonuses are more interesting, but then you're restricted as to which flag types can go into each part so many times, so it does make you sort of be a little bit more considerate as to what you're going to do with them. Although again, it also means you have to diversify in this game. You can't really focus because you just can't have that many flag tiles on the same spot. So I don't feel like I'm differentiated again. But these bonuses are just a minor part of the game when all you're doing is just basically going, well, I'll go here, I'll get some power, I'll go here, I'll get some science tokens, I'll build a uni here that lets me level up this track. And then at the end of the round here, I'll level up this track, and I'm falling asleep. You know, the interaction with other players is barely there. I mean, yes, you're competing for these, but that's the crux of every game. You're competing on a VP track in a normal Euro. The fact that you're competing on these influence tracks is the nature of the game. But I don't influence your board. I don't directly do anything to you. It's just I put a worker down and I block a space you might have liked to go. But you need to think about your own board. You can't go somewhere purely to stitch someone up. So if you are stitching another player up, you're doing it pretty much by accident and not deliberately. So, little interaction, 2 hours, not the most compelling of gameplay either. Where are the good parts of this game? I mean, there are some. The rules are not that complicated. You have got, you've got 2 books for the game. One of them is about the concepts of Asian tigers, which, and the sort of design diary, basically, which I don't think this game kind of warrants it, frankly. But then you do have a rulebook, which is not particularly huge. There's a decent amount of pictorial representation to go with the text, and there's not a huge amount of rules. And the rules themselves are relatively straightforward. I certainly wouldn't put this in front of a light gamer. This is definitely not heavy. This is probably a medium weight game overall. But, aside from a few bits that could have been written a little bit better, the rulebook is not bad. Until you get into the solo mode. Then the solo mode is an absolute pain, because first of all you have to flip constantly between the solo rules and a specific part of the appendix that explains what the automna player aids, like player tiles and things like that do, which is already bloody annoying. But also the wording on some of the rules with the solo mode, particularly in the cases of when you've got a situation where it could go to 1 of 2 or 3 different places, which one does it go to, are worded terribly. The iconography, not intuitive at all. In fact, some of it actually looks like it contradicts itself. And, there's a particular rule with regards to how it gets global points from flags that's worded so badly in the book that the first time I played the game solo, I got that completely wrong and it maxed itself out on that track. Once I realized, oh wait, that's how you're supposed to interpret it, it made more sense and the solo mode balanced itself a bit better. You've got 4 levels of difficulty, and essentially all the AI does is it flips a tile and it tells you where it builds infrastructure and where it puts workers. So it functions essentially like a multiplayer character, which then stems to the fact of why would you play this with multiplayer, frankly. I mean, if you play this with 3 or 4 players, it's just the fact that there's a bit more contention with the spaces, whereas with 2 player, you have slightly less spaces anyway, and they kind of do stuff just like any other normal multiplayer person would. So the solo mode is fine once you've got the rules down, but it's not a short game. You're still going to be playing this for a good 90 minutes to 2 hours doing it. And again, when all said and done, what am I doing that's particularly fun? It's just a pretty bland game overall. I mean, it looks bland and it plays bland, but I'm seeing a few people who like the designer's previous games and spreadsheets, giving this 8.5s, why are we on decimals, 9s and stuff like that, and why? I don't get what you're seeing here, honestly. The game is not bad per se. I mean, it's hard to call it bad because it functions, it's relatively smooth, it certainly will at least get your brain ticking, but it's just so bland. It's flavorless. The whole thing looks flavorless. There is not a shred of, trying to sell this to people in terms of a game night was one of the hardest tasks I've had to do this year. And believe me, with what I've had to do at work lately, that's saying something. Trying to sell people by going, look, this is what it looks like. This is the cover, this AI generated cover, which don't get me started on that. But you've got this theme, you've got this cover, you've got this board, and these components. try selling that to your game night group. Trust me, it's a hard sell. Trying to get people to play this. They almost have to do it out of, I'm practically calling in debts like in John Wick, where I cash in the coin saying, look, I played your game last week, you owe me, you will play this. And then they played it, and for the most part, people have just been very meh on it. I've probably disliked it more than others, but nobody's really come out of it going, oh yeah, that was amazing, I really loved that. They just kind of go, yeah, it's alright, it's fine, does the job, but does the job isn't good enough. And for me, it doesn't even really do the job. I don't want to sit and play this for 2 hours. If I'm going to play something dry, there's a lot of other dry Euro games I would rather play, like countless amounts. But this one doesn't even have the theme it's based on. It could be themed around literally anything, because it is basically just a spreadsheet with a bunch of tracks. If you're into that sort of game, fine. You're going to have a blast. You'll probably enjoy this. And I know some creators have already enjoyed it because most of the time they do just play spreadsheet games and somehow get a kick out of them. But for me, I want something more thematic. I want something more interesting. I want something different. This game doesn't feel different. This game feels like it probably came out 10-15 years ago. And, maybe it would have actually done really good if it was 10-15 years ago. But I don't see people grabbing this off the shelf. I don't see this getting a ton of buzz. I don't think this is going to be talked about in a few months, let alone this time next year. It just feels like a complete dud. I can't call it terrible because it doesn't make me angry playing it. There are games that do that far better, but comparing this to something else that I rated quite low, which was September, at least September gave me something nice to look at and had, some other cool little bits within it, but it was still not particularly great. I'm giving this one overall a 3 out of 10. This one for me is just a game I'm not interested in. It doesn't have the aesthetic appeal. It doesn't have the gameplay that would keep me engaged. I'm bored by the time I'm halfway through this, just rinsing and repeating. And if I play the game again straight after, I'll pretty much just be doing the same stuff again. Like, the replay value just isn't there. And I definitely heard like one creator say like, oh yeah, the replay value is in how you tactically do stuff from turn to turn. Do I need to quote The Princess Bride here?
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Or perhaps I should quote Star Wars.
That's not how the Force works.
It isn't present. If you like the gameplay of this, you'll have a good time, but I think you're just going to find it samey as you play it over again. I don't think people are going to play this every week, because you'll just run out of variety that quickly. Once you've played this once, you've seen everything the game can offer, with no chance to it being that much more varied for the next game. It's the same thing every time, it's the same spreadsheet, just looped basically. And for me, that's not good enough for 2025, Maybe it'll have its fans, I'm certainly not one of them. I don't think it's a bad game, even though I am rating it a 3 out of 10, but it is just very, very boring.
I hope they remember you.
So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Check out the rest of my SN content. There's a lot of games I've been reviewing and more to come besides. Even when I go off on my holiday, there will be some more content releasing. This one didn't work for me, but maybe it did for you. By all means, let me know in the comments. Keep it civil though if you're a fan of this game. Yes, different strokes for different folks. But if you really like the game, then explain clearly the reasons why, because I'd be interested to know, and I think a lot of other people would as well. But, is this the type of game for you? Have you had any interest in it? Have you had a better experience than me, or have you had the same experience as I have? By all means, let's discuss civilly. So, is that a word? No, probably not. So take care, and remember, regardless if you would have preferred this be themed around an Asian zoo, it's still only a game. So bye for now.